Kwame Chisulo gave up the opportunity to study abroad and quit his job with an annual salary of 1 million just to take care of his blind girlfriend Amina Ndlovu. For 3 years, Kwame stayed almost all the time with Amina, cooking for her, reading to her, and even washing her hair and changing her dressings. On the day when Amina successfully underwent a corneal transplant and regained her sight, Kwame thought he could finally have a new beginning with her. However, at the celebration party, Amina proposed breaking up in public, and her tone was so cold as if she was dealing with an insignificant relationship. The big screen on the stage suddenly lit up, showing an intimate photo of Amina and her childhood sweetheart Thabo Kato. The two of them were snuggling together and smiling sweetly. The words on the picture are very eye-catching. "Thank you for always being with me when I need you most. It is you who makes me believe in love." Then, Amina fed Thabo a bite of cake with her own hands in front of Kwame, with an incredibly gentle smile. Thabo even bent down to help Amina wipe the cream off the corner of her mouth, and then the two of them raised a glass of juice and drank it together, as if it were a couple's ritual. The guests were in an uproar. Many of them secretly took out their phones to record the video, and some people whispered, "This plot is even more exciting than the TV series." Kwame looked indifferent and didn't say a word the whole time. He just glanced at the two of them silently, then turned and left. No one knew that the place Kwame was going back to was not a rental house, but a multi-billion-dollar mansion given to him by his father Malik Chisulo. Late at night, Kwame was sitting on the balcony of his penthouse villa in the suburbs of Johannesburg when his cell phone rang. It was Amina who called, her voice trembling. She was crying and gasping for breath, calling Kwame's name and begging him to come back. At this time, Zuri Dlamini, Kwame's childhood sweetheart, had just come out of the shower and laughed when she heard the noise. Zuri sat on the armrest of the sofa, crossed her arms and snorted, "Kwame is my husband now. Don't try to be so frivolous." At the celebration of restoration of sight, Amina suddenly stood up, holding a wine glass in her hand, with a slightly tipsy look in her eyes. Amina smiled and looked at the people in the audience. She said in a soft but clear voice, "For me to be able to see the light again this time, there is one person I want to thank the most, and today, I want to solemnly respond to his feelings." Kwame was stunned. He almost immediately thought that these words were directed at him. 3 years ago, Amina was in a car accident and became blind. It was Kwame who dropped everything and took care of her throughout the whole process, accompanying her through the most difficult days. Kwame took Amina to various places to find famous doctors, just to restore her eyesight. Everyone at the scene also assumed that Amina was talking about Kwame, and discussions broke out one after another. There aren't many men like Kwame nowadays. Although he's not so good, he's so affectionate. Amina is so lucky. Someone in the crowd pushed Kwame forward and joked, "Why are you standing there like an idiot? Why don't you get on? This is giving you status." Kwame clenched the gift box in his hand, which contained a diamond ring and roses that he had prepared in advance. Kwame's heart was beating fast, and his eyes were filled with undisguised joy. Kwame was still thinking, no wonder Amina had been so secretive lately and even took the initiative to request a celebration party. It turned out she wanted to give him a surprise. With full of expectation, Kwame stepped onto the stairs and looked at her tenderly. "Amina." But unexpectedly, before Kwame could finish his words, Amina had already passed by him. Amina walked up to Thabo Kato, with a smile on her face, and said affectionately, "Thabo, let's be together." Kwame froze in place as if struck by lightning. There was silence for a few seconds, and then there was a burst of surprised exclamations. Some people couldn't help but speak up for Kwame. "Amina, Kwame has taken care of you for 3 years. How could you do this?" Amina's expression was indifferent, but her tone was chilling. "Of course I am grateful to Kwame, but I can't sacrifice my whole life just to repay you, right? What's more, those 3 years were the darkest time in my life. Every time I saw him, I thought of my own misery, which was really disgusting. If he really wanted to do good for me, he should have let me live a better life instead of relying on me and holding me back." Kwame's heart tightened and his nose felt sore. He never thought that after giving everything he had, he would get such a light and cold remark in return. When Amina was most seriously ill, she wanted to commit suicide several times, and it was Kwame who pulled her back from the brink of despair. In order to help Amina get back on her feet, Kwame quit his high-paying job in another city, stayed by her side, and took care of her daily life. He even took care of Amina's urination and defecation personally, without any complaints. In order to help Amina build up her confidence, Kwame even learned Braille and didn't even cry out in pain when he accidentally pricked his hand and it bled. At that time, Amina choked up and promised that she would never let Kwame down in her life. But now, the first thing Amina does after regaining her sight is to confess her love to Thabo? Kwame stood there like a complete joke. Then, in order to live up the atmosphere, Amina smiled and waved her hand, asking someone to turn on the projection screen. An intimate photo of Amina and Thabo immediately appeared on the screen. Selfies with face close together, fingers clasped together, staring into each other's eyes affectionately, one after another, made Kwame's eyes hurt. There were also sentences attached to the photos, which cut into Kwame's heart like a knife. On May 20th, I went to the amusement park with Thabo. He was so gentle. On October 1st, we traveled together. He has a charm that fascinates me. Kwame remained motionless, the smile on his face completely gone. At this moment, Amina went a step further and sat on Thabo's lap in public. The two smiled at each other, fed each other cake, and drank a glass of juice together. Kwame couldn't help but look over, and at this moment, Amina kissed Thabo provocatively. Amina smiled wantonly. Kwame, whether you like it or not, we are a couple now. If you are not willing, I can compensate you as the nursing fee for the past 3 years. As she spoke, Amina pulled out $300 bills from her bag and threw them at Kwame's face. Kwame clenched his fists, digging his nails into his palms, and even bleeding from between his fingers. It turned out that in Amina's eyes, her 3 years of hard work were only worth 300 yuan. Many people around him knew how persistent Kwame was when pursuing Amina. At that time, no matter whether it was scorching hot or rainy, Kwame insisted on delivering meals to the door every day and was never late. After they got together, Kwame always obeyed her and spoiled her. But Amina is irritable because of her blindness and often yells at Kwame. Sometimes Amina even went crazy and reached out to dig out Kwame's eyes, saying, "How can you see?" Kwame didn't dodge and just let Amina scratch him, letting her nails scratch his eyelids, leaving a red circle. Later, in order to calm Amina's emotions, Kwame even wore an eye mask at home, just to empathize with her. Not to mention those nights when I was kicked awake in the middle of the night just to buy a bowl of spicy and sour noodles for Amina. Kwame walked 2 kilometers in slippers to buy the noodles, but Amina complained that the noodles were cold, and not only did she not eat them, she dumped the whole bowl on him. Kwame didn't make any noise or fuss. He just quietly cleaned up the soup stains on the floor. Kwame knew that he loved Amina, so he was willing to endure it, but when he saw her being intimate with Thabo today, his heart was completely chilled. Kwame used to be jealous, angry, and explode because of Amina. Some people at the scene whispered that Kwame would make a big scene today like he did before. But to everyone's surprise, Kwame just smiled faintly. Kwame looked at Amina. His voice was light but frighteningly cold. "Don't worry about the money. Just treat it as dog food. But you and Thabo are really a good match. One is a scumbag, the other is a bitch. You are a perfect match." Kwame choked Amina with a word and her face turned red. But Kwame was right. Thabo had the word scumbag written all over him. Thabo is a man who has always been entangled with Amina and is very intimate with her, but he has never made their relationship clear and has only been indulging in that ambiguous and exciting gray area. Not only that, Thabo also led Amina step by step into the abyss, smoking, drinking, fighting, going to nightclubs, racing, doing everything and daring everything. The car accident that ruined everything happened when Thabo was racing with Amina. After that, Amina lost her sight. But what Thabo did was to accept the compensation and then fled to South Africa without even saying goodbye. From the moment Amina became blind, Kwame was the only one left to take care of her. Because when Kwame was in his darkest days, it was Amina who pulled him back. When Kwame was falsely accused of cheating and cyberbullied, he almost jumped off a building. It was Amina who rushed up to him, hugged him, and urged him to live while crying. Kwame will remember that kindness for the rest of his life. Now, it's Kwame's turn to protect Amina. Kwame spent all his savings to pay for Amina's medical expenses. He cooked nutritious porridge himself, hired a nurse to take care of her, and even wiped her body and changed her dressings himself. Kwame patiently walked Amina, letting her bask in the sun, watch the dawn and sunset, and fill her world with laughter bit by bit. It was during those quiet and warm days that Amina finally let down her guard and accepted Kwame's confession. The two got together smoothly. Under Kwame's meticulous care, Amina's eyes gradually recovered. But at this time, Thabo contacted her again. He heard that Amina had a chance to regain her sight. Even though Amina was already Kwame's girlfriend at the time, she actually started video chatting with Thabo behind his back. Kwame has seen the two of them flirting with each other across the screen many times, and even blowing kisses to each other. Kwame couldn't suppress his anger and questioned, but the two of them responded in unison as if they had rehearsed it. Thabo sneered and said, "Kwame, you are a grown man. Why are you so petty? Amina and I grew up together. I have seen everything about her. If you really want to pursue her, it is still your turn." Before Kwame could finish his words, Amina glared at him and questioned him impatiently. "Kwame, you are my boyfriend now. Aren't you satisfied? Can you stop being so suspicious?" At that moment, Kwame felt cold in his heart and could only hide in the corner in a daze. But Kwame did not give up. He secretly checked Thabo's background and found that this guy was still living a life of debauchery in South Africa, fighting, borrowing money, and promiscuity, all of which were scandals. Kwame showed the results of the investigation to Amina, hoping to alert her. But Amina just said, "You were jealous of him," and pushed back all the advice. Amina even accused Kwame of spreading rumors and kept saying, "How could I be so bad?" Amina was blinded by Thabo, but now she has forgotten the pain she suffered because of a few brand-name bags. Amina turned a blind eye to Kwame's 3 years of hard work, but Thabo's earrings and necklace were enough to win her heart back. Kwame felt it was extremely ironic for a moment. After a long silence, Amina suddenly spoke in a cold tone, "Kwame, I came to you today because I want to break up peacefully. We are not compatible and it is not suitable for us to continue." Kwame couldn't believe his ears. Amina even turned around and accused Kwame of blackmailing her with a favor and calling him vicious. Kwame couldn't help laughing, but his eyes were full of sarcasm. "I'm vicious? Amina, during the 3 years when you were blind, I took care of you, made soup for you, wiped your body, comforted you. Even if it was a dog, it would be tamed in 3 years. But what about you? As soon as your eyesight got better, your first action was to officially break up with someone else. Who was vicious?" The scene was silent for a few seconds, but soon discussions emerged from the crowd. "Isn't Amina too cruel? What does Kwame want? Kwame is such a sucker that he ends up with nothing." Amina's face flushed, but she still stood firm and sneered back, "Kwame, it's right that people strive for higher positions, right? You are affectionate, but you can't give me the life I want." Thabo is young and promising, the head of the Chisulo family group, who returned from studying in Australia and earns hundreds of thousands a year. "What about you? You are broke, and you still want to compete with him." As Amina spoke, she raised her wrist and swung the diamond bracelet worth 30,000 Australian dollars. "Look, this is what Thabo brought back from Australia. Can you afford it? Why should I choose you?" Thabo was not to be outdone and sneered, "Kwame, you are a poor fellow. What do you have to be worthy of Amina?" Kwame looked at Amina in front of him and felt that she was so strange, like another person. The girl in my memory who would give her umbrella to stray cats and care about the lower-class people is no longer there. There is only calculation and vanity in Amina's eyes now. Suddenly, Thabo noticed the box of roses and diamond ring next to Kwame and immediately raised his eyebrows and said, "Kwame, are you still planning to propose?" When Amina heard this, her expression immediately turned cold, disgust written all over her face. Are you worthy of proposing to me? Kwame, can you please look in the mirror?" Kwame was completely disappointed. His obsession with Amina was also completely gone at this moment. Kwame grabbed the bouquet of roses and the diamond ring, walked to the window, and threw them to the stray dog outside without hesitation. "I wouldn't give this kind of thing to a dog. And it's not you who dumped me, it's me who dumped you." Kwame's move shocked the entire audience. The surroundings suddenly fell into silence, and everyone couldn't help but gasp. Amina's face fell on the spot, anger burst out of her eyes, and she said hatefully, "Kwame Chisulo, you." Before Amina could finish her words, Kwame turned around and slammed the door. He left without looking back, leaving the roar behind him. "Don't regret it. Who do you think you are? A poor guy like you. Except for me who made a mistake at the beginning. Who would take a second look at you?" Kwame didn't pause at all, but instead walked faster, his steps full of determination. "Regret? What do I regret?" Kwame sneered in his heart. For 3 years, Kwame had been carefully accommodating Amina's temper and had hardly ever stood up for himself. In order to help Amina recover her sight quickly, Kwame insisted on massaging her every day, even though his hands were so sore that he couldn't lift them. Amina likes cats, so Kwame overcame his severe cat allergy and went to pick a cat himself. From feeding the cat, cleaning up its poop to playing with the cat, she takes care of everything by herself. But what about Amina? She never said thank you. She just enjoyed herself and was spoiled to death. Whenever she got angry, she would take it out on him. Scenes of smashing bowls and ashtrays were no longer uncommon, and sometimes people would even throw things directly at Kwame's face. Kwame's hand was cut and his forehead was swollen, but Amina just said, "I'm sorry," and let it go. Kwame endured all this silently, just because he loved Amina. But now think about it. What have we gained in return for all these years of hard work? In return, I was told, "You are a poor bastard," and ended up with betrayal and humiliation. Kwame punched the wall hard, smiled bitterly, and shook his head. "I am such a fool. I wasted so many years, enduring with Amina, helping her through the difficulties, but in the end, I was stepped on." Kwame no longer hesitated, picked up his phone and called his hometown. "Dad, I've thought it through. I want to go back and inherit the company." On the other end of the phone, Malik Chisulo was stunned for a moment. And then his tone revealed a hint of surprise. Your lovesick brain has finally come to its senses? I told you that Amina is unreliable. The secretary told me that you were dumped by her and humiliated. See, you should have listened to me earlier. I asked you to go and spend time with Zuri Dlamini, but you refused to go. Now you are suffering, right? You ran away from home for her, worked until midnight, and knelt at my door all night to treat her eye disease. If I didn't feel sorry for you, how could I ask the medical wizard to treat her? Kwame's ears echoed with his father's scolding, and every word was like a needle piercing his heart. But this time, Kwame didn't talk back or make excuses. He just said in a deep voice, Dad, I was wrong. I was so stupid. There was silence for a while, and then the mother Fatima Chisulo's voice came. Husband, the child knows his mistakes and can correct them, which means he has grown up. Give him a chance. Finally, Malik sighed and compromised. After Kwame returned to the family business, he began to get serious about company affairs and study hard. Kwame is no longer as careless as before. He started from scratch and showed his extraordinary ability in just a few weeks. Malik was pleased to see this, and once in a meeting he couldn't help but praise Kwame. You have improved. A few days later, his father suddenly said that Zuri was coming back from studying in the UK and asked Kwame to pick her up at the airport. Kwame readily agreed, but didn't take it too seriously. When they arrived at the airport, Kwame recognized Zuri at first sight. She was wearing a pure white dress and a pearl headband, and she looked as gentle as the spring breeze. Kwame was stunned. Was this gentle and elegant girl in front of him really the little girl with twin ponytails? Zuri smiled sweetly at him and called out like she did when they were little. Kwame, brother. The familiar name brought him back to his childhood, but now it had a strange feeling of excitement. Kwame quickly took her luggage, and Zuri thanked him quickly, smiling gently and considerately. Zuri rushed to carry the luggage several times, and was afraid that Kwame would be tired. She wiped his sweat and bought him ice water along the way, with a caring look on her face. Kwame, brother, why don't you give it to me, and I can pull it myself? I'm really sorry to trouble you. Kwame smiled and said it was okay, but he felt a warm feeling in his heart. Kwame couldn't help but think that Amina had never cared about these things before, and even often stuffed Thabo's luggage on him with a look of disgust. At this moment, Kwame suddenly had an inexplicable liking for Zuri. During the meal, Zuri subconsciously put Kwame's favorite dish in front of him. After not seeing him for many years, she still remembered his taste. And after being with Amina for 6 years, she didn't even know that Kwame was allergic to chili peppers. Every time he insisted on ordering spicy soup base, if Kwame refused to eat it, Amina would say he was a spoilsport. After the meal, Kwame felt more relaxed and happy than ever before. When Kwame got home and turned on his phone, he found that Amina had posted several updates on her moments. The pictures showed her and Thabo holding hands, looking very sweet and loving. The words, I am destined to be with you, made Kwame's eyes hurt. Kwame ignored her, but Amina kept updating her status, as if she was deliberately trying to show off her presence. Kwame no longer hesitated and directly blocked and deleted her, never wanting to have anything to do with this woman again. Kwame thought it was all over, but he didn't expect that they would meet again soon. Art Cafe, in the center of Lagos for afternoon tea and a chat. Art Cafe is the most exquisite boutique coffee shop in Lagos. It is not only exquisitely decorated and provides high-end services, but also a social landmark exclusively for the upper class, symbolizing identity and status. After finding a private seat by the window, Zuri offered to order and smiled as she asked Kwame to sit down and wait for her. Kwame sat quietly, looking at the busy traffic outside the window, but unexpectedly, he ran into Amina and Thabo, who were on a date here. At that moment, Amina was wearing a fiery red tight skirt, and her whole body was almost stuck to Thabo. The two of them walked in with a sense of oppression and rushed straight to Kwame's seat. Thabo's face was gloomy. He walked forward and slammed his palm on the table. The sound was particularly harsh in the quiet cafe. What are you doing sitting here? Don't you know this is my Thabo's exclusive seat? He asked through gritted teeth, aggressively. Kwame slowly raised his head, his eyes cold and his tone revealing a hint of disdain. When Amina saw that it was Kwame, she was stunned for a moment, then she raised the corner of her mouth and revealed a sarcastic smile. Kwame? Why you again? Amina looked at something funny. Are you crazy because you're broke? You even followed me on a date? You're too persistent, aren't you? Amina crossed her arms and looked around. Do you know where this is? This is a high-class place. How dare a poor boy like you step in here? Kwame sneered at this, his eyes revealing contempt. You are too self-indulgent, aren't you? This cafe is mine. Why can't I come? Amina clearly didn't believe it, and the contempt on her face became even stronger. You dare to say that Art Cafe is yours? Do you know who owns it? It's owned by the Chisulo family group. Amina snorted coldly. If you want to say that you are the heir of the Chisulo family group, Then I think you might as well go and act. You really don't even think twice before you lie. Kwame still sat there, expression impassive. Thabo was completely enraged at this time, his face flushed red, pointing at Kwame and yelling, "I'm warning you. Get out of my seat right now. Do you understand? If you don't get out, kneel down and apologize." Thabo approached step by step, his tone full of threats. "Otherwise, I will make sure you have no place in Lagos." Amina immediately agreed, looking righteous. "Thabo is the VIP of this store and a senior executive of the Chisulo Group. Can you afford to touch him?" Kwame looked at the two people in front of him, as if he was watching a farce, without saying a word. Thabo was completely enraged by Kwame's silence. He overturned the table, causing cups and plates to fall and hot coffee to splash onto the ground, causing the surrounding guests to exclaim, "Isn't that Thabo? I heard that he spends 2 million naira here every month, and everyone in the store treats him like a patriarch." "That's right, it's his seat. Last time, a kid took his seat and was beaten up and hospitalized. He hasn't been discharged yet. Stop talking, let's stay away and don't cause trouble." As the chatter around him grew louder and louder, Thabo became more and more arrogant, so he waved his hand and called over the cafe manager, Neo Abebe. "Manager, why are you still standing there? Why don't you kick this guy out right away? Don't let people like him in again. They stink and only affect the experience of our customers." Thabo changed the subject, his tone becoming more threatening. "If you don't do anything, then don't even think about renewing my VIP membership." Nia looked at Kwame expressionlessly, then looked at Thabo. The next second, her face turned cold and her tone was sonorous. "You too. Why don't you get out?" Amina's smile froze instantly, but she didn't realize what was happening yet. Her tone was full of smugness. "Kwame, did you hear me? Get out of here now." But the next second, Nia suddenly picked up a cup of hot coffee and poured it towards Amina and Thabo mercilessly. The two men were splashed with water all over their faces and bodies, and they were stunned, with their expressions completely frozen. Amina was furious and screamed, "Are you crazy? Do you know who we are? We are VIPs." Nia snorted coldly, walked to Kwame, bowed, and said respectfully and firmly, "You are the ones who should get out. This is our real distinguished guest. He is the son of the chairman of the Chisulo Group. You can't afford to offend him." After hearing what Nia said, Amina and Thabo froze in place as if struck by lightning, their faces frozen in disbelief. Thabo was shocked and blurted out, "How is it possible? He is a poor boy with no background and no money, but he is actually the son of Malik Chisulo, the young master of Lingtian Group?" Amina sneered, her eyes full of contempt. "Don't be ridiculous. How could I not know what kind of person Kwame is? He used to be a useless person in the dormitory of Lusaka University, just a useless person who was just waiting to die and would never be able to turn over a new leaf in his life." Amina changed the subject, her tone became sharper, and her face was full of sarcasm. "Oh, I see. Kwame, did you give money to Nia to cooperate with you in this drama? Just to piss us off? Because you are jealous of Thabo and I's happiness." Hearing this, Thabo seemed to regain his composure. He raised his eyebrows and resumed his arrogant and proud expression. "Kwame, you liar, you dare to trick us." Thabo pointed at Kwame and said with gritted teeth, "You must apologize to me immediately and pay me. This suit of mine was custom-made by a French designer and is worth 3 million naira. If you don't pay me, I will make sure you can't even leave the cafe." Kwame was so angry that he laughed. He stood there, but he felt ridiculous in his heart. They were the ones who started the fight. Why are they blaming them now? Just as he was about to open his mouth to fight back, Zuri came out with 2 cups of freshly brewed lattes. Upon seeing the chaotic situation, Zuri's face changed. He immediately put his coffee aside and trotted to block Kwame, protecting him behind him like a calf. "You are so arrogant. Let me see what you have to threaten the heir of Chisulo Group." Zuri spoke quickly and sternly, not giving in at all. "You think you are so powerful because you have a big backer? If Kwame is unhappy, you will not even have a foothold in Nigeria in a minute. You can try it." Zuri pressed on, his eyes sharp as a knife. "Also, if anyone dares to touch Kwame, we at Dlamini Group will not let you go even a hair." Tabo's face immediately turned green after hearing her words. Just as he was about to explode, Zuri added coldly, "There are surveillance cameras in the store. It will be clear who started the trouble and who started the fight first. Do you want me to check it now?" As soon as these words came out, Amina and Tabo's faces suddenly changed color, as if they were slapped on the spot. Their faces turned blue and white, and they were so embarrassed that they wanted to find a hole to crawl into. Amina's eyes were filled with anger. She glared at Kwame with gritted teeth and roared as if something had been robbed. "Kwame, just to piss me off, you actually found a woman like this to act with you? Do you think I will get jealous and come back? Don't dream. Kwame was completely speechless. He pulled Zuri to his side and said with cold eyes, Amina, stop being so self-indulgent. It's really disgusting. As soon as Kwame finished speaking, Zuri nodded calmly to manager Nia. Nia immediately understood, walked up to the two, and unceremoniously ordered them to leave. You two, please leave the cafe immediately. Your VIP status has been permanently revoked. We will no longer accept you. Thabo and Amina were completely humiliated and could only grit their teeth and walk out of the store in shame. But before leaving, their eyes were extremely vicious, staring at the phone in Kwame's hand, with a cold look in their eyes. Kwame stood at the door and heard their hushed conversation clearly. Amina, did you really see him submitting his resume to LinkedIn group just now? Of course. I saw Kwame's information in the HR system with my own eyes. I can't be wrong. Huh. I knew this guy was pretending. What Master Chisulo? He must have made it up to fool us. The store manager and that woman must have been hired by him. If he really dares to come to Chisulo group, I will kill him. Kwame's eyes flashed, and he knew that these two people would not give up easily. Because Kwame's performance in the group has been increasingly outstanding recently, and his business capabilities have also improved rapidly. Malik simply made the final decision to hand over the entire Chisulo group to Kwame and directly appointed him as general manager. Kwame has never liked to act in a high-profile manner. In order not to cause speculation within the company, he decided to keep a low profile on the day he took office and did not notify any ordinary employees. Throughout the company, only a few senior executives knew that Kwame would officially take over. Coincidentally, that day was also the day when new employees joined the company. What's more coincidental is that the suit Kwame was originally going to wear was accidentally hit by bird droppings falling from the sky on the road, so he had to send it for dry cleaning. Kwame had no choice but to change into a spare employee uniform and walk into the building with the new employees. Ironically, that group of new employees was selected by Kwame himself yesterday at the cafe where Zuri asked him to meet. As the elevator doors opened, Kwame saw Thabo and Amina. Thabo is the head of the group's human resources department, and Amina is a new employee who just joined the company in the past few days. Relying on her relationship with Thabo, Amina was directly assigned to be a team leader as soon as she entered the company. Kwame snorted in his heart. People with connections are really everywhere. Thabo's position seemed impressive, but in fact, several projects had gone awry, and it was obvious that he had climbed up the ladder through connections. Kwame secretly made up his mind. Sooner or later, he would clean up these parasites. At this moment, Thabo and Amina saw Kwame wearing an employee uniform and did not recognize him at all. Instead, they thought he was an ordinary newcomer. The two men raised their chins, looked arrogant, had contempt in their eyes, and spoke in a tone full of sarcasm. Hey, isn't this the guy who claimed to be the chairman's son in the cafe a few days ago? How come he's just an employee today? Thabo, some people just like to brag, saying they are young masters, but today they are dressed like this. Aren't they a newcomer? Haha, you're right. If he is really Malik Chisulo's son, then I am the president's illegitimate son. When other people in the office heard this, they all looked at Kwame with mocking eyes, with contempt and disdain written all over their faces. Someone lowered their voice and asked, "Is this true?" As a result, Amina immediately stepped forward and exaggerated the matter, telling the whole story of what happened in the cafe that day, with a joking tone. After listening to this, everyone started talking about it, and the scene suddenly became lively. You dare to pretend when you look like this? You are such an excellent actor. Can the heir of Chisulo Group be so shabby? It's hilarious. People like him who have high aspirations but poor skills deserve to be severely punished so that they will know how cruel reality is. Someone's words woke Thabo up, and he curled the corners of his mouth slightly, revealing a malicious smile. Thabo said coldly, "Kwame, it happens that no one cleans the bathroom on this floor. Since you have nothing to do, why don't you go and clean the toilet first? Please take care of the garbage as well. I will check it myself later. If you find even a trace of dust, you will have to write a 30,000-word self-review." After that, Thabo did not forget to perform in front of everyone. If you have any chores, you can hand them over to Kwame. After all, newcomers need to start from the basics, right? As soon as Thabo opened his mouth, a bunch of people in the office immediately threw heavy tasks such as forms, reports, and data entry to Kwame. Amina, however, said nothing and just stood aside, watching coldly, with a hint of pride on her face. Kwame looked at the papers they handed over, but he didn't even reach out to take them, nor did he have any intention of cleaning the toilet. Kwame stood there, expressionless, looking at this group of clowns with a half-smile. Seeing that Kwame didn't make any move, Thabo's face changed, anger surged, and he clenched his fists and was about to go forward and attack. "Do you really take yourself seriously? You dare to act in front of me? Are you thinking of rebelling? This is my territory. It's not your turn to act wild here. Thabo's fist was about to fall, and Kwame slightly turned sideways, preparing to dodge. At this moment, a stern voice sounded from behind him, shocking the whole place into silence. Do you dare to touch my son? Following the sound, I saw a middle-aged man walking quickly, followed by a group of executives in suits. It was Kwame's father, Kwame Chisulo, the chairman of the Chisulo Group. Deputy Manager Jabari Okonkwo recognized Malik at a glance. His face suddenly changed, and he glanced at Thabo in panic. What are you still standing there for? Get down on your knees and admit your mistake. Jabari growled in a low voice. This is the new general manager who was parachuted in, and he's also Chairman Malik's biological son. The air seemed to freeze instantly. Everyone present stopped what they were doing, looking at Kwame in shock and disbelief. Amina Ndlovu and Thabo were also struck by lightning. They stood there in a daze, the color draining from their faces rapidly. Is this a joke? Kwame is actually. After all these years, we didn't hear any news. He is actually the young master of Chisulo Group. The two men found it hard to accept the fact before them. They muttered to themselves, and they were immersed in extreme shame and surprise. But all of this was confirmed by Malik's appearance, and there was no point in denying it. They wilted all of a sudden, not daring to straighten their backs. Their expressions changed from arrogant to as pale as frosted eggplants. Their eyes became evasive, and they wished they could find a hole in the ground to crawl into. Jabari still wanted to save the situation a little bit, and immediately tried to defend Thabo. Chairman, this may be a misunderstanding. Thabo and the others don't know the identity of Master Kwame. He was wearing an ordinary employee uniform. Maybe they recognized the wrong person. Before Jabari could finish his words, Malik glared at him and interrupted him coldly. Shut up. It's not your turn to interrupt here. Jabari's face flushed, and he quickly lowered his head and stepped back. Malik turned to look at Thabo, his eyes as sharp as a knife, his tone full of uncontrollable anger. You are the bastard who wanted to touch my son, right? How dare you humiliate and bully him again and again? Malik's voice almost exploded in the hall, causing people around him to take a step back. People who bully my son have no right to stay in our company. Pack your things and get out now, immediately. As soon as he finished speaking, Malik turned his gaze towards Amina, his eyes becoming even colder. Are you the one who let Kwame pour out his heart and soul for you, but then betrayed him? He ran away from home for you, severed ties with his family for you, and even begged me all night long to cure your eye disease. But what about you? You trampled his sincerity under your feet and humiliated him in public. You ungrateful woman, get out of here too. Remember, I, Malik Chisulo, swear that as long as I am alive, you will never have a foothold in Lagos. These words hit everyone's heart like a heavy hammer. The scene was completely silent. Everyone was frightened and huddled in a corner, not daring to make a sound. Thabo finally realized the seriousness of the situation. His legs went limp and he collapsed to the ground. He looked at Jabari tremblingly. Uncle, save me. Please save my life. I don't want to die. It turns out that Thabo was able to climb to the position of supervisor and act recklessly in the company thanks to the protection of his uncle, the deputy manager. However, Jabari was so frightened at this time that he quickly shook off Thabo's hand and said with disgust, Who are you? Don't spit blood on me. How can I be your uncle? Don't drag me into this. Thabo was stunned on the spot, his face full of tears, wailing incoherently. You clearly promised my mother that you would take care of me. How could you turn your back on me? Kwame watched this farce coldly, without even a hint of sympathy. He looked at his father and said in a cold and decisive tone, Dad, fire these 3 people. It's time to clean up the termites in our company. Malik nodded and waved his hand crisply. Several security guards stepped forward quickly and threw all the personal belongings of the 3 people out before they could react. They were driven out of the office building like 3 desperate dogs in the water and fled in disgrace amid the contemptuous gazes of the crowd. Afterwards, Malik solemnly announced in front of all employees that Kwame officially took over the position of general manager, and everyone in the company looked at him with surprise. The company crisis came to a temporary end, and the father and son returned home together. As soon as I walked in the door, I heard a sweet and clear female voice coming from the room. Brother Kwame. It was Zuri Dlamini. She was wearing a clean apron, with her hair braided on the side, looking virtuous and gentle. Kwame stood in the living room, stunned for a moment. Zuri, why are you here? Kwame frowned, but with some complicated emotions. Before Zuri could answer, Fatima on the side interrupted with a smile. Zuri knew you were coming back for dinner today, so she came over to cook for you, just to let you taste her cooking skills. Fatima added, This kid is really thoughtful. Kwame, You should also do your best to marry Zuri as soon as possible. Your father and I are waiting to drink in your wedding wine." Zuri blushed and whispered, "Annie." Fatima smiled even more happily. "Calling me auntie is so strange. I will be happy if you call me mom." Zuri's face instantly turned red like a ripe tomato, and she was so shy that she almost didn't dare to look up. Kwame looked at Zuri's reaction and quickly changed the subject. "Mom, stop teasing me. The soup in your kitchen is about to get mushy." When Fatima heard this, she immediately turned around and rushed into the kitchen. Zuri gently grasped the hem of her apron, lowered her head, and whispered, "Thank you, Kwame brother." Kwame knew Zuri liked him since they were little. They grew up together in the old town of Lagos, and they knew each other so well that he couldn't hide her feelings. But Kwame always only regards Zuri as his sister. Kwame's heart was completely filled the moment he met Amina. The appearance of Amina is like a ray of light shining into Kwame's life. He can never feel love for Zuri. So, Kwame told Zuri very clearly at the beginning that he already had someone he liked, and asked her not to waste her time and to find her own happiness. In order to give Amina a sense of security, Kwame even deleted Zuri's contact information and tried to avoid unnecessary contact. Zuri was very sensible. She quietly withdrew and even chose to go abroad for further studies to stay away from emotional troubles. She also silently blessed Kwame. Zuri came back this time because Kwame's parents told her the news of his breakup. Fatima and her husband have always regarded Zuri as their ideal daughter-in-law. They have tried to bring the two together at the dinner table many times, and even automatically picked up food for Zuri with their chopsticks. After dinner, Fatima even used the excuse of asking Kwame to send Zuri home so that she could be alone with him. Under the streetlight, Zuri suddenly stopped, her cheeks flushed. Zuri turned around gently, looking at Kwame with a firm but gentle gaze. "Brother Kwame, I heard from Uncle about you and Amina. During these years abroad, I know she has never been good to you, and now you are separated. She doesn't know how to cherish you, so I will do it. Brother Kwame, can you give me a chance?" Zuri raised her head. Her eyes seemed to be filled with broken stars, focused and gentle. Kwame's heart skipped a beat for no apparent reason. But Kwame quickly calmed down, sighed, and shook his head seriously. "Zuri, I'm sorry, I can't promise you. I just got hurt, and now I only want to work, not suitable for love. And I'm not sure whether my feelings for you right now are gratitude or love. It would be irresponsible to promise you this. You deserve someone who truly loves and cherishes you, not someone who is still healing." Before he could finish his words, Zuri stretched out a finger and gently pressed it against Kwame's lips. "Brother Kwame, don't rush to reject me. I am willing to wait for you. I have been waiting for you for 18 years, and I don't mind waiting a few more years. I have chosen you for my life, and you are the best person in my heart." Zuri's eyes were full of determination and tenderness, as if they could melt everything. Kwame finally said nothing, just stared at Zuri quietly. From that day on, Zuri came to Kwame's house more and more often. Fatima and her husband are happy to see this happen and always create opportunities for the two to be alone together. The relationship between Zuri and Kwame is also quietly heating up. One evening, the two had just finished a date, and on their way home, Kwame unexpectedly ran into Amina. At first, Kwame didn't recognize Amina. The woman in front of him was disheveled, her face was thin, and her body was covered with bruises. She was no longer the delicate and beautiful woman she once was. Amina recognized Kwame at the first sight. Her eyes instantly reddened, and she rushed over and cried inconsolably. "Kwame, I'm sorry, it's my fault. I was deceived by Thabo." Amina cried as she told the truth. It turned out that the so-called elite returnees were just a cover. Thabo was just a pauper who gained trust through packaging and lies. Thabo not only got into a lot of romantic affairs abroad, but also owed a lot of debts. Now that the creditors have come to his door, he actually wants to force Amina to pay back the debt together. What's even more terrifying is that Thabo began to abuse Amina, threatening her and even using private videos as a threat. "Kwame, please help me. As long as you are willing, I will break up with him now, and we can start over, okay?" Amina cried so hard that she almost knelt down. Kwame sneered and looked at Amina sarcastically. Why did she think he would still give unconditionally like he did in the past? Why did she think he would still accept her? Just as Kwame was about to speak, Zuri suddenly stood in front of him, his eyes calm but sharp. "You regret it now. What did you do before? Brother Kwame, can you recruit or dump him whenever you want? You don't cherish him. Now it's my turn to cherish him." Kwame held Zuri's hand and just walked out of the cafe. Amina's eyes suddenly became sharp. She finally noticed Zuri's presence and her emotions instantly got out of control. Amina asked sharply with a trembling voice, "Kwame, who is this?" "You. Didn't you say you would love me forever?" Kwame's face was frighteningly calm, and his eyes were cold. He didn't bother to say anything more and simply held Zuri's hand tightly, saying in a low and cold tone, "What you see is the truth. It's your own choice that you have become what you are today. I have no responsibility to bear the consequences for you. More importantly, we are over. Please don't disturb my life anymore." Amina stood there as if struck by lightning, her eyes wide open, unable to believe what was happening before her eyes. Amina shook her head frantically, her voice almost breaking down. "No, it's impossible. You weren't like this before. You only had eyes for me. You knew that every time I had menstrual cramps, you would immediately bring me brown sugar water and help me wash my dirty clothes. You even pricked your hand to learn Braille for me and never complained." Kwame ruthlessly interrupted Amina's crying, his eyes as cold as ice. "But I was so good to you at the beginning. How did you treat me? You were used to enjoying all my efforts. You take advantage of my love for you to trample on my dignity and take my feelings for granted. People like you don't deserve true love and will never learn how to love others." Before he finished speaking, Kwame pulled Zuri away without hesitation, and behind him was Amina kneeling on the ground crying heartbreakingly. When Kwame sent Zuri to the door of her apartment in the suburbs of Lagos, he stopped and turned to look at her with a complicated and apologetic look in his eyes. I didn't mean to take advantage of you when I held your hand in front of her before. I just wanted her to give up. It was a show." Zuri's cheeks were slightly red, but her eyes were clear and firm. She bit her lip, looked at him, and said softly, "Brother Kwame, actually, I don't mind. I really hope that everything is true. Can't you really? Give me a chance." Kwame was shocked. Zuri's eyes were so serious that his heartbeat suddenly accelerated. After a moment of silence, he nodded. "Okay. I will seriously consider it." From that day on, Amina's crazy entanglement began. She first waited outside Kwame's house for a whole night, and then ran to the downstairs of his company to block him from delivering food. The most outrageous thing is that Amina actually got Kwame's personal mobile phone number from an unknown channel and called him frantically for several nights, crying miserably, "Kwame, I really know I was wrong. Please give me another chance, okay? I will definitely love you well." Zuri sat on the sofa, listening to the incessant harassment. Without hesitation, she took the phone and responded coldly, "He is my husband now. Stay away from him." It happened to be Kwame's birthday that day, and Zuri stayed at his house to celebrate his birthday. After hanging up the phone, the two looked at each other, their cheeks flushed. No one denied the title of husband, and the atmosphere suddenly became subtle and warm. In these seemingly peaceful days, Amina's behavior became more and more crazy. She actually went directly to the downstairs of Kwame's company and put up a banner with lines of densely written confessions. Amina even used roses to spell out a huge heart on the ground and shouted through a loudspeaker to the entire office building, "Kwame, I love you. Let's start over, okay?" Kwame finally couldn't stand it anymore and called the police to report Amina for disturbing public order. The police arrived quickly and forcibly removed her. Even so, Amina still stood there stubbornly, tears in her eyes, and kept muttering, "Give me another chance. Kwame." Kwame stared at her coldly, his tone suppressing anger. "Amina, don't make me hate you." This sentence was like a sharp blade, directly cutting off Amina's last hope. She stood there in a daze, her eyes gradually becoming empty, and she walked out like a zombie, murmuring, "Kwame, don't hate me. I'm leaving now." From that day on, Amina disappeared completely, and Kwame's life finally returned to its former peace and regularity. Kwame finally realized his own feelings and chose to accept Zuri's feelings and marry her. But on the wedding day, a familiar yet unexpected figure suddenly appeared. On the wedding day, Kwame gave Zuri enough face. The scene was covered with colorful balloons, the sound of salutes resounded throughout the street, and dozens of white doves soared into the sky. The scene was like a movie. Kwame specially customized a pigeon egg-sized diamond ring for Zuri. The diamond shines so brightly in the sun that it is blinding. Kwame held Zuri's hand in public and said firmly, "Zuri, you have pursued me 99 times. This time, I will pursue you once. Will you marry me and become my wife?" Zuri's defense was broken at once. Tears fell down her face, and she cried like a little bun, but her smile was brighter than ever. "I do. I've been waiting for this sentence for a long, long time." She stretched out her trembling hand and let him put the ring on her finger. Applause broke out instantly. The two hugged each other affectionately, exchanged rings, and touched their foreheads, as if the whole city was celebrating for them. Suddenly, a trembling voice came from the crowd. "Amina, Kwame has taken care of you for 3 years. Can you really bear it?" The crowd looked sideways. It was Amina. She had lost weight, her face was pale, and she seemed to have lost her former brilliance. Kwame's eyes tightened and his brows locked instantly. What was she doing here? Was she trying to disrupt the situation? Kwame was about to ask someone to ask her to leave, but Amina suddenly burst into tears, Her eyes were as red and swollen as two ripe red dates. Amina opened her mouth to say something, but Kwame couldn't hear her over the roar of the salute. But Kwame could see Amina's lip movements clearly. Kwame, I'm sorry, I regret it. Amina couldn't stop crying. Her makeup was smudged, and she looked like a doll crushed by time. But it's too late now. That relationship has long become a thing of the past. At the lively wedding, only Amina stood alone outside the crowd, as if she was out of touch with the whole world. In the end, Amina staggered away from the scene, tears streaming down her face, and even her back revealed despair. No one expected that something big would happen that night that shocked the entire city and was even reported on national television. According to news reports, after the wedding, Amina returned to her home in northern Nigeria and became increasingly angry, believing that Thabo had ruined her life. Amina put sleeping pills in Thabo's drink, and when he fell asleep, she took out a kitchen knife and slashed him more than a dozen times in an extremely brutal manner until Thabo was no longer able to make a sound. Amina then opened the window and jumped from the 5th floor to her death. When the police arrived, they only found a handwritten letter and a bank card in the room. Kwame, I'm sorry, I've hurt you time and time again. Now that you've found your happiness, I sincerely wish you the best. This card contains all my savings, which is my final apology and compensation. By the time you read this letter, I should have passed away. I know I've made a lot of mistakes, so let me pay for it with my life. After reading the letter, Kwame just sat there quietly, without much emotion in his heart. That past is like dried petals. No matter how beautiful it is, it has long lost its fragrance. Kwame did not touch a penny of the money, but donated it all to a children's relief fund on the Zimbabwean border. Leave it to someone who needs it more than me, Kwame whispered to himself. Turning his head, he saw Zuri leaning against the window looking at him. Kwame walked over and pulled her into his arms. Wife, marrying you is the greatest blessing in my life.